Hello and welcome along to Series 2, Episode 6 of the Inner Huddle. It's a little bit different today. I literally have got Geoff as my right-hand man, and we've got Betsy somewhere remote, and we're doing it via Zoom, so hopefully the technology will work. This episode, if it works, is sponsored by SR Health, Safety and Engineering Limited, and if it doesn't work, then no one will ever know. How are we doing, guys?
I'm good, Pez. I'm coming to you from inside the ether. I'd like to say I was somewhere glamorous like the Caribbean and I just couldn't make it, but I'm somewhere just outside of Southampton.
We're in the usual place. We've just moved things around, and as usual, we've had technology problems trying to get microphones to work through Zoom. Absolute nightmare. If anyone's an expert, please get in touch because we're useless, aren't we, Geoff?
Very. It's just strange being able to see yourself as well.
I know, it's really weird. But we'll give it our best shot. It reminds me of going back to the pandemic time when we used to do a lot of Zooms, didn't we, Geoff?
Not sat next to each other.
Not sat next to each other.
Definitely not.
Right, as usual, we have got a series of questions in front of us. I have 10. It might be that we can't get through them all, but we will try. And as always, we'll try and do them some service and add some value to our answers. And I think we should just crack straight on in, don't you, Geoff? Am I asking the first one?
Yeah, because it's a long one.
It's a long one. Okay. Right. Question number 1. My 6-year-old recently got scouted for a professional club whilst playing in a tournament. The scout has asked 3 of the players, including my son, to attend a training session. The 2 others are going, but we, his parents, are worried that he's too young. We want him to simply enjoy playing football without any pressure. However, we are concerned that he might not get another opportunity. What are your thoughts?
You go straight to me.
Well, I asked questions. So.
Okay. I think this is definitely a Betsy question. I like batting it across, don't I?
It's cricket season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've put why you're concerned and what you're concerned about, and then I would just think it would be really good if Betsy could talk about how this could maybe be framed in a way that doesn't put any pressure on a child that might want to go across and give this a try and enjoy the experience.
Yeah, that would be great because this happens a lot, especially with the players that we coach at Pezzers. They get to a level, they start standing out in their matches and tournaments, and they often get scouted, for want of a better phrase. And I've never really known that I can think of a parent turn the opportunity down, although Charlie Webster's parents didn't they, for Charlie when Chelsea first came in for him, but then 3 years after that did then decide that the time was right. But usually most parents think that they are going to miss out and will take their children along just to see what it's all about. So is there a good way, Betsy, that this can be framed where it doesn't put pressure on the child?
It's an interesting but tricky question. 6 is very young, is my first instinct. 6 is very, very young. And I think this sounds really, really negative, but ultimately I think a 6-year-old, I don't know how you guys would view this, a 6-year-old being scouted by a professional club or an academy or something like that doesn't actually mean very much to me. And there's a good chance that that child won't go on to play at any level, or may go on to play at a really high standard. It doesn't actually predict anything, really. So I think there is a pressure for the child. I think asking the child how, do we know if it's a boy or a girl? Yeah, a boy. Asking the child is probably a good place to start, because if he's super excited and really wants to give it a go and has an enthusiastic attitude about it, then actually just almost getting on board with that and encouraging it that way. Yeah, this could be really fun. Let's go and give it a try. It doesn't matter if you don't like it. You can leave at any time. That kind of openness, if you're gonna put the child in that situation. If your child is a little bit hesitant, or thinks it's a really big deal and seems a bit nervous about it and things like that, then maybe reframing or using your judgment, I guess, Pez, in your situation, not in your situation, but the situation you speak about, Charlie Webster, like, you know, what were his parents hesitant about, and actually did some of that intuition then pay off in terms of it not being the right time? So I guess as a parent, don't ignore what your instinct might be telling you as well. So I think gauging what you think the child's initial reaction is probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem with it is, as soon as you enter that rat race, then there might be some pressure put on you, especially as children, even at this age, do get released. So I'm not exactly sure whether it's an official pre-academy development centre like we used to run, Geoff. I'm presuming it is. We never released anyone from ours, but then we were in complete control of who we brought in the first place. But at others, where they might have a maximum of 30 to 40 children they can bring in, and the scouts are recommending players all the time, then you bring them in, have a look, and if they're better than what you've already got, someone goes. So kids pick up on that, and parents obviously pick up on that very, very quickly. And then suddenly the child's under pressure just through what the environment is and the situation is. However you frame it up as being extra training, or, you know, let's just see how it goes and it could be fun, that's great to start with. But when maybe one or two of those friends of yours that you've gone with suddenly get released, and you think, oh, it might be my turn next, or if your friends stay and you're one that gets released, then it's going to be a very miserable experience for you. Personally, I think it's too young at 6 to bother any sort of risk with any negativity towards a sport that they should be just enjoying and loving. Completely contradictory, because we used to run one of these centres, didn't we, Geoff?
But have never released anyone.
Never released anyone. So yeah, we had a policy between ourselves that we would only recommend children that we knew and that would get the most out of it for themselves, wasn't it?
I think enjoyment has just got to be the primary concern for a child at this age. Enjoyment is the biggest factor to consider. So if the child's going to really enjoy going into that setting, then yeah, maybe it is the right thing to do. And maybe that is great for the child's development and the child's social skills and everything else. But if the child's going to enjoy it more being, you know, wherever he's playing, you know, wherever he got picked up, if you like, then I think that should be the priority, personally.
Yeah, and I think by the sounds of it, the parents might have that gut instinct that it's not a great idea at the moment. And I would reiterate that there's no rush. But I think this fear of missing out, this FOMO, is a big thing, especially if the other two children seem to be doing great, or you might see their parents putting something on social media with their kids in their brand new professional kit with the badge on and stuff, and it's always gonna be that niggling feeling, oh, that could have been my lad. I think it's a really, really difficult situation.
I think if the hesitation from the parents is wanting to take the opportunity while it's here now, because it may not come up again, that would I would say try and take that out of the equation. Because I think even in the last podcast we did, which was what, episode 5 or 6?
Oh, who knows?
Who knows? I spoke about a player that I'd worked with in a Premier League like B team, who had actually only got scouted as such for that kind of arena at, you know, 17, 18 years of age. So I don't think there's I don't think the concern should be on maybe not getting seen again.
Yeah, I agree. It's no players slip through the net really anymore, so these chances are always going to be there all the way along. And if they don't come again, it might mean that it wasn't right to do it back then, because they were never going to reach that level, and so they would have been released, and all that negativity would have come at some point. I mean, I think it's 99.83% or something will get released from a pro club. So statistically, your child won't be there for the whole journey. So protecting them from that at a young age, I think, is quite important. But if you are going to do it, then like you say, frame it as just a bit of extra training, a bit of fun, something for you to get something out of, not for the club. Try and reframe it like that, that for want of a better expression, you're using them, they're not using you, for some free training, and try and keep the pressure off all the way, and things that we used to advise parents that came to our one, Geoff.
Yeah, I mean, that process shouldn't even be an option for people to run something where there is no exit route, is there? If you could try and find out what the process is going to look like over the next year or two, and have some guarantees that it isn't going to be if we find a better child that we think's a better player, then we're just going to release them because 6 years old. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it, when you read it out loud?
I mean, the scouts will do their best to only invite players in that are of a standard, but still there's only a limit of how many kids they can take in. So if they've only allowed 40 children at their centre and they've got 40 kids, and the scout comes along with 2 other children that they've seen in the local league that are exceptionally good for whatever reason, then kids are going to get released.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is the onus should be on them to create extra sessions.
Right, somewhere
so
for them.
You shouldn't
safety net.
Yeah. That's not in our control, is it?
No, well, I've always thought that clubs should look after maybe local leagues, or they should even run their own leagues, and then they can have a look at every single player whenever they like and don't actually need to take them out of their environment. Or they could have select matches or the occasional select training session where they would choose certain players to go training with them or play in a festival at the weekend, and that could always change.
You have some good ideas sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, I try my best.
Putting the world to rights.
And I think something like that could work. The only way it wouldn't is, say, in our area where you've got a Southampton and a Bournemouth and even maybe Chelsea and things, and their areas might overlap a little bit, which leagues were run by which clubs. But I'm sure there could be a way where they're all involved, and to everyone's benefit, and every player at a club, rather than a club coming in and taking players away, going in and enhance what they've already got and do some coaching for the whole group in return for having first dibs, if you like, on these players when it comes to signing at contract time. I don't know. I just think there could be a way of solving the problem, or at least improving it. Wow. Right. Whew. Question number 1 done, I think, Geoff.
Question number 2.
We're off and running.
I'm considering paying for some one-to-one coaching for my 10-year-old son. Do you think they are worth it?
Do I think your child's worth it, or the coach? No, obviously they mean, do you think it's worth doing some one-to-one training? We both have done and do occasionally one-to-one coaching, Jeffrey. So do you think they're worth it?
I mean, the sessions I've seen you do, definitely. But this, again, similar to the last question almost, in my answer is I think these things should be audited, and there should be some sort of coaching Ofsted or someone that can go around. Governing body. Well, there is a governing body for football, isn't there? But something that comes around
this branch of it for
and then
training.
and checks that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and maybe given schools, or so that parents have some idea about where's the right environment, even for a one-to-one coach, and that would solve a lot of problems, because anybody could become a one-to-one private coach tomorrow if they wanted to.
And we've seen a few recently, haven't we, advertised and crop up, and I'm sure if you dig a little bit deeper, a lot of these one-to-one coaches don't have proper insurance or qualifications. Some might have the basic level 1 and then think that because you can apply for some insurance through the FA, can't you? But that doesn't cover private coaching sessions, and I don't think a lot of these coaches realise that. So if you're going to book some, find out if they are insured and what qualifications they've got, and who they might have worked with in the past and who they're currently working with. I've made some notes because it is something, as usual, I feel quite strongly about. You have to be really, really, really careful. This might bring Betsy into it, with one-to-one coaching, because I found that as soon as you pay for sessions for your child and you're doing something extra, you're in danger of your child thinking, wow, this has suddenly become serious. Where a sport that might have been really good fun, they just like playing with their friends, everything's going fine, they suddenly realise, wow, why am I getting extra tuition? Is it because mum and dad or both think it's much more important than I do and got really serious? Or do they actually think that I'm rubbish? Depending on their age, children can think that. So they might think, I'm getting extra training because it means a lot to mum and dad, and I'm getting extra training because I'm not actually as good as where they think I should be. And that can really affect them psychologically. In my belief, I mean, I'm not the resident sports psychologist here, Betsy, but from
that's my cue.
I've seen it where suddenly they think, wow, this has all got a bit serious. I mean, kids have lots of activities and interests that they're involved with, and they don't get often private coaching for the other things, like, I don't know, skateboarding, bike riding, computer games. Don't suddenly go, right, son or daughter, I see you like skateboarding, I'm going to get you some private sessions. Or I see you like Fortnite, I'm going to start getting you some private tuition on your computer games. But suddenly with football, it's like we need to get ahead of everyone else, or we need to catch up to everyone else, and it tends to be parents comparing their child to other children, and either wanting to get ahead or catch up.
On the flip side, though, we've talked on other podcasts about competence breeds confidence, and getting lots of repetitions in of working on the things and really excelling at something might really help somebody if the one-to-one session's good.
I think the point is they have to be really, really good.
Yeah.
And they have, not just at football and football coaching, but they have to know as much as possible about psychology and children's development, not just football development. Because if you're just taking to someone who's doing drills that they're copying off the internet, and other things they've seen, but they don't know why they're doing it, and their language and praise isn't conducive to growing a growth mindset, but maybe a fixed one, it can be a very difficult situation. A better word. I don't know, because if they're done really, really well, they're excellent for technical training, which is what it is, skills development, skill acquisition, and like you say, if you're getting competent at that, that's going to breed confidence, which will help you in your matches. But I think it's quite risky, especially if you don't know who you're taking your child to. Let's just all go to you, Geoff. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm waiting for Betsy to unpick it all.
Yeah, sorry, Betsy. I
probably
no. I'm reluctant to. Normally, I just get in there, but I don't want to create a little lag on the remote as we're working, or as I'm working remotely today. So I think I'm gonna do a Geoff here and say, consider why. Like, why are you doing that as a parent? Why would you want to do that? Because that might unlock quite a lot. Just asking yourself that. Is it because you just want your child to be better, or your child just wants to be better? Is it because there's an identifiable area that you're looking to work on that maybe is not going to get individual attention in a group training session, in a club session, wherever your child's playing? So I think ask yourself why. Is it just because you want to maximize, like, how good can we get our child here? Not necessarily for your own game, but for their benefit as well. But why would you do that? And I think Pez, you sort of mentioned a parallel. Well, you said the word tuition, because I was thinking this is like getting an extra tutor for maths or English, isn't it? Why would you do that? Because the child's perception will be, I'm not very good at maths, so mum's had to hire me a tutor to come and work with me for an extra hour every week. So I think be careful how you're framing it, if it's your choice or if it's it might be coming from your child, I don't know. I think probably to consider framing it up as just more or a different quality of training if you're going to go down that road, rather than it feeling like, I think Pairs, you're spot on. I think there's a huge risk when you enter into one-to-one coaching that your child thinks, well, okay, now I've got to perform. Now I'm under a bit more pressure. Now it's got really serious. Now I'm expected to maybe keep going from strength to strength, and maybe you do take out a bit of the enjoyment. So maybe consider age as well. I'm not sure if we know the age of this. 10 years old. So still pretty young. But if you're looking at really working on something that's clearly identifiable, like there's a particular skill that your child's struggling with that's actually holding them back in their club setting, then yeah, maybe. So that's my summary.
Yeah, I agree. I was very negative. I apologise for that when I first went in, but I've seen a few horror stories over the years. But I think you're right. If and I used to get it quite a lot. If a child's struggling maybe with their weak foot, tends to be the left, but not always, then one-to-ones can be a good way of getting that extra training that not many managers are going to spend the time during their team sessions to help children with their weaker foot. So that might be an angle, like I say, skill acquisition, fast feet. There are loads of things you can do. I mean, we do them, and have done for many years, but we're always aware of the negative impact it has on a child. I mean, I've seen it before where a child's been, I don't know what the right expression is, but everyone else in the team, including the parents, know that child is getting extra tuition, and their parents might be seen to be a little bit pushy, and then the other children want to show that they don't need extra tuition, and they're better than this child, and it can just leave, I don't know, just unnecessarily sometimes leave a bad taste. I don't know. It's a very tricky one. I've said that twice on both questions now. It's a tricky one. But yeah, I don't know, Geoff. Anything else to add on that one? Just be very careful.
I don't know if we've really answered the question, have we?
Are they worth? Well, like we said originally, check if they've got insurance and qualifications, who they are, that they're going to be safe, and try and go, like Betsy said, with something specific in mind, rather than just book them in for one-to-ones. I mean, we've heard it a lot, haven't we? When we've had them, we just want to improve their confidence, and then they sort of leave it to us. Yeah, go with something a bit
Could it
specific.
Be a great opportunity for family members to get involved and not even call it extra tuition or one-to-one coaching, and have siblings and mum and dad just go down the park and do what David Beckham's dad would do with David Beckham, and stand there whilst he practices free kicks all day? And it could be something that you could save yourself a few quid on, couldn't it?
Yeah, well,
and actually have a real bond.
If you find a good one-to-one coach, it might be that you could go to them, do a session, and ask what can my child do on their own, or I can do with them, and then you can just check in with a one-to-one coach every month or 2 months or something like that.
Try and get some good takeaways.
But if you think it's just a tick box that, oh, I'm doing everything I can for my child, they're getting extra tuition, they play Saturdays, they play Sundays, they play in an elite league, they're getting extra one-to-one coaching, I'm doing everything I can, it's not going to be my fault if my kid doesn't make it or something like that. It's me being negative again. But yeah, don't use it just as that. But if there's a real desired outcome, you find the right person. Happy? Not falling asleep there, are you, Betsy? No?
No, I've just had a nice strong coffee, so I'm all good, Pez.
Good. Right. Is it me asking now?
It's question number 3. Yeah.
Question number 3. Numbers. I'm on odd numbers. Right. I love watching my son play football. I take him to every match and training session and stay to watch it all. I just wanted your thoughts, as I'm concerned that I might not be giving him enough space. He's 8-year-old and seems to enjoy having me there. See, when I asked them, I just looked straight at you, Geoff.
Yeah, I think most 8-year-olds, their parents are there watching, aren't they? It's not like it's going to stand out. It tends to be as the child becomes 14, 15, 16, that you go to a sideline and there's one man and their dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't know why an 8-year-old would be concerned about that. and maybe ask them and keep an open dialogue as they go through their journey in youth football, because that's what's going to matter the most.
I think that's a great starting point. Ask your child whether they mind you being there at every match and every training session, and go from there. You can be in danger of overdoing it and always being at training, because the one day you're not, your child might be looking for you, and you might have become a bit of a comfort blanket, which you don't want to do. You don't want to be at risk of being sort of a helicopter parent when you're always there in case anything goes wrong, and you might subconsciously be putting pressure on the child, because they don't want to make mistakes if you're always watching training. You've got to get the balance right, because you want them to know that you care about their sport, and the training's more important than the matches. So you should come and watch a fair few training sessions as well, but maybe not all of them. Maybe have a break and just say to your child, I trust you to get on with it. Just, it's your time, not mine. I'm going to drop you and go tonight, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to read a book, but express yourself. Because a lot of parents, when they're watching everything, the children do feel like they're under pressure because they don't want to make mistakes in front of mum or dad, and they're always looking for approval. If they've done something well, they'll look to see if their parents are watching, or if they've done something that they see is wrong, they look to their parents to see if there's any sort of reaction, and it can become a bit much. So maybe give them a bit of space.
It's a good point, that one. We have had lots of parents, haven't we, that stick their thumb up or their thumb down, and I suppose if you are watching, being conspicuous.
Yeah, well, we've had them, I think we've mentioned on this, where they the parent will hold the water bottle, so during water breaks, drinks breaks, they'll go over there and they can get, oh, you're doing really well tonight, son, or try doing this, or make sure you get wide and get crosses in a box, whatever it might be. Little, not Pep Guardiola talks, as you said last time. So yeah, be careful. And one big thing I would say is, with parents that do watch training, make sure you watch it all, rather than just the match bit at the end. So I see it a lot. Parents will drop the kids off, they'll come over, we'll do all the training. A lot of ours was with a ball each. And the parents will be stood around chatting to each other or not really paying attention. And as soon as we go into any sort of match or anything competitive, bang, all eyes suddenly turn. And then what you're doing is just subconsciously telling your child that you're not that bothered about the training, but you're only bothered about whether they're, or how they're performing in the match and the competitive stuff, when really it's training that's the most important bit. So I would say try and watch all the training if you can, and show an interest in that, because it's much more important than how they might or might not be performing in the match.
I'm really interested in what Betsy thinks, because I've heard you say this type of thing
many times,
thousands of times before.
Oh, I have, yeah.
So I'm actually going to say something which probably goes against the grain of what you might expect me to say, which is I'd actually be aware of what other parents are doing. And although I'd normally say the opposite, because we've spoken about comparison and how you shouldn't compare your child to other children, and I guess that goes for your own behavior as well. You don't want to necessarily just follow what other parents are doing, but there's a relevance there. If you are the only parent that is watching, I'm using an extreme example, but if there's really not many parents, or you're the only parent watching every training session, every game, then that then takes on a different meaning for the child. And that's where they might think, oh, why is dad always here? Like, the other parents aren't there, or they might feel embarrassed about that, or it might just give a different meaning. It sounds like this parent is doing what they're doing with really good intention. So wants to be really supportive, but also wants to do the right thing if they are perhaps not giving their child enough space. So I think just consider what other parents are doing and how that might then impact how your behaviour is being viewed by your child. So not necessarily to just follow what other parents are doing, but just being aware that if it's against the grain a little bit, then it might take on a different meaning for your child. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
It's perfect sense. And in a lot of my sessions now, when we train indoors, I don't let any parents in anyway, so I take it out of their hands, Betsy. Just make it, unless there is some sort of viewing gallery. But most of the halls I use, there's no really access anyway. So if they did come in, it would be very cramped, and the children would feel under pressure. And I want them to have a pressure-free environment where their decision making is not affected. And they're free to express themselves, and I just find what I do and what I'm trying to achieve works much better when, sadly for them, sometimes parents aren't watching, and some of them take it really badly. They don't like not watching the training, but they can all blame me, can't they, Geoff?
Yeah, I actually put a bit of a shudder down my spine when Betsy said the only parent watching. Like, I love my mum and dad to bits, but if my mum was the only person on the sideline watching,
it would be a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, that would be mortifying, I think.
Yeah. Cool. So in answer to that one, maybe start by asking your child what they think. Have a look around at what everyone else is doing, and just be aware that you're not smothering them at all and not affecting any of their enjoyment and their decision making on the pitch. They're sort of playing without fear of failure.
And probably be consistent with it as well, but keep asking.
Cool. It's you, Jeffrey.
Question number 4. My son is fairly small and sometimes struggles in matches against the bigger, faster players. Can you give me some advice to help him not lose confidence?
Yes, probably I can, Jeffrey. I would have thought. I think if your child is a smaller player, or late maturer, as I think the expression is, then in my opinion they need to make their technical ability their superpower. So they really need to double down on ball mastery and what they can do technically with the ball, because they're not relying on speed, strength, power, and all those things that some of the other children might already have. And eventually, if they have a spurt and they catch up, they're going to be the same size or bigger than everybody else, and they're going to be technically brilliant anyway. So yeah, having said that, it's not any different advice I would give to any player, because I'd say you should all be working technically. And sometimes what happens is the bigger, stronger players at that snapshot in time rely so heavily on their physical attributes that when other players start catching up, they really struggle and they reach a plateau, which can be very difficult sometimes for them to handle, and for their parents to handle as well. If they've had a player that's excelled, shall we say, because of these attributes, and then suddenly they're not as far ahead seemingly as other players, it can be a bit of a blow to them. So I would say to bigger, stronger players as well, don't neglect your technical training, because other players will catch up eventually.
I've just written down as you're talking Messi and Maradona. And you couldn't have 2 better role models to show somebody what can be achieved, even if you haven't got the size and the strength and the pace and the power maybe that the bigger, stronger players have got, and what the adversity that they probably went through for being the smaller players, and coming out the other side of it. Just shows what can be done to the best players ever. So
yeah, never forget that, and I've said it already on this podcast many times, it's the training that's the important thing. As long as they're able to train well, and they're getting a lot of training, don't get too frustrated about performance in matches, because they're probably still getting a lot out of that, being the underdog and trying to find different ways of using what they have got and trying to compete against bigger, stronger lads or lasses. And I think they'll get maybe more out of it to a certain extent, but they might be getting less contact time with the actual ball. So you need to make sure that in training or on their own that they're actually getting a lot of contact time with the ball to improve their ability technically with their skill acquisition and decision making and things like that. What do you think?
very good answer. I'm interested in what Betsy's going to say too.
Yeah, she's sitting very patiently today, isn't she?
I'm poised because I'm just aware that every time I speak, I think it will cut out the recording of you guys. So I'm waiting until called upon. So I also wrote down 2 words, and that was Lionel Messi. I think we got some great role models in the game, both present and past, I guess, of, you know, being smaller or having, there's an array of players, isn't there? We're not talking about a sport like basketball where typically you're going to be hugely at a disadvantage if you're not a certain height. There's so many role models in football of different body types, different shapes, different attributes, which I think is a good thing when you're perhaps talking to or about a younger player who's maybe struggling with like how those attributes might be limiting factors through like their play at the moment. I think so one example came to mind when Pez, you were saying about even stronger players or bigger players not neglecting technical attributes, and I actually think of my own experiences. So when back in the day, I won't reveal my age, when I was playing or like growing up playing netball, I was really fast. So I neglected probably some of the things I focused on because I could always beat everyone for speed. So I didn't really need to worry too much about whether my positioning was spot on or whether anything else was, you know, technical understanding and things like that, which I did develop over the years, hopefully to some degree. But I relied loads on my speed and my agility because I could get past anyone purely on that. So I just probably neglected other aspects of my game. So I think that's a really important point. You will not have all the physical attributes. We don't own all the physical attributes. You'll have your own strength areas. Depending on, I know we haven't got an age on this player. So with an older player, there's now there could now be an emphasis on, okay, well, you're maybe smaller, so how do you get stronger and faster and more agile? Maybe there's more of a focus on what you can do physically to make the most of your strength areas or overcome other problems that you might face in someone that's bigger than you. With a younger player, obviously, you're not going to place as much emphasis on that. You're not going to be getting your 8-year-old pumping iron in the gym. So depending on what age we're talking about here, I think that's relevant. And I think just almost how it's a problem-solving exercise, isn't it? If you're smaller than the opposition and maybe you're not as physically strong, how do you get around that? What do you need to work on, and how do you deal with that as a problem? Sometimes it's not going to come off, and other times you're going to be really chuffed with yourself if you've used, you know, really good ball control or really good skills or speed or whatever to get past those kind of players, and actually rewarding that in yourself, and as a parent rewarding that as well if that's sort of them solving that problem, if you like.
Well, I think that's the key point. You're going to learn more, and it's better for your development if you've got these problems to solve and you're actively trying and having some success and some failure, and things to learn from, rather than if your child's an early maturer and very quick and strong and the game seems to come easy to them, then they're not facing these problems. And then eventually when they reach a standard and an age, they might have a whole load of problems of their own to face when other players have caught up, and maybe going past them to work out for themselves, and then they're not going to be used to trying to problem solve because the game's been fairly easy for them up until that point. So there's problems with being small, there's problems with being big, and it's being aware of it, and like you say, how can they have problems to solve, whatever their body type, I guess. Happy, Jeffrey?
Very happy.
Yeah, we're flying through these today. Right, odd number, that would be me, Geoff. It has been said before, I'm an odd number, so it's appropriate. My son plays for a local under-9 Sunday team. A few of his friends from the team have joined a Saturday team, and he's expressed an interest as well. We're worried that it might be too much for him to play twice a week and all the training, but don't want him to fall behind the players that are playing more. Do you have any advice? I'm sure Jeffrey's got lots of it. Jeffrey.
Lots of advice.
I've actually made a few notes on this, so
Go on then.
no. I asked the question.
You asked
Follow
the
you.
question.
I think you're scribbling.
I've underlined the word worried, and I've underlined
Okay.
fall behind. And again, I'm trying to think as if I'm Betsy. I try and do that a lot now.
Well, we've got Betsy to think like Betsy, so
I'm
maybe.
trying to have an open mind. And should you be worried about falling behind? What age is this? Under 9s? Possibly, maybe, I don't know. Or is there other things you could be doing that aren't football? Or is it, I don't know how much travelling's involved with going around with this new team, and you're going to be in the car for ages and get less contact time with the ball. If it was a local team, I would say don't do loads of hours driving around in the car, chasing around.
You've been reading my notes.
Yeah, I haven't actually. I haven't even read my own. Chasing around, trying not to fall behind your mates. Why not go to a PESA session, get thousands of touches of the ball, lots of different movements, lots of different scenarios, have loads of fun and improve individually, rather than missing out on the time that you could be sat in a car actually falling behind, where you could be catching up and overtaking.
Yeah, I think Betsy will be very impressed that you've circled fall behind, because I think if that's the motivation for playing, then it's not a really fantastic one as a starting point for why you're considering putting your child in, just so that they can not fall behind. I think what you said important about maybe playing another sport or something like that as well. Don't just throw everything in at football. And then you said about the travelling time. And I've written here a little bit more about the travelling time. So I've put players that play for 2 teams might appear to be getting ahead, but often only gaining a bit of extra experience. Just playing 1 extra game, you're not getting enough contact time with the ball. So to go to your travelling, I worked out here, Geoff, that if a match is 15 minutes away, which is very conservative, even in most local leagues, so it's taking you 15 minutes to get there and 15 minutes back, that's half an hour travelling time. That would be 50 hours a season spent travelling if you played a very conservative 25 games for each team. I think that's right.
So that's realistically going to be over 200 hours, because no one's travelling 15 minutes.
No one's travelling 15 minutes, and nobody's only playing 25 games for each team. Normally with cups and tournaments and things, it's going to be a lot more than that. But even if it was just 50 hours, if you think on average each player gets less than 3 minutes on the ball per game, and if we generously say that your child is going to get those full 3 minutes, which they won't, then that's only 2.5 hours a season actually in contact time with the ball in those matches for 50 hours in the car. Doesn't seem worth it to me. It's the training, as I've already said, that's the most important thing. So I wouldn't worry about playing 2 matches at the weekend. I'd be more interested in an extra training session during the week if you really want them to excel and fulfill their development.
Or walk down the park with your mate and get thousands of touches.
Yeah, or play in the garden.
Yeah, you've got one.
Do some ball mastery, practice free kicks and things at the goal, whatever it might be. But I don't think it's the holy grail is playing Saturdays and Sundays and training 4 times a week with those teams that are geared up to what went wrong in the last game and what you're going to do to put it right in the next game. I don't think it's enough. It might well be too much.
They're very powerful stats. I think we should publish them and campaign Grassroots Football Sundays.
Grassroots football, yeah, possibly. I
Only.
I don't like children playing, and I never have done, on a Saturday and a Sunday. Personally, I think it's too much. And as I've just said with those stats, it's not enough gain to be made for all the negativity that can come from it. But I understand children think their friends might be going across and they might be missing out. And I've never known it do anything other than cause problems in the long run, especially if there's a certain group of players that are playing for both teams. if one team's doing better than the other, the manager of one team gets a bit annoyed, and players might be rested on a Saturday for a big game on a Sunday, and there might be clashes with tournaments and clashes with presentation evenings and all sorts of things. I don't like it. Never have that. Think, choose one team that you really, really like, that your child's getting everything they need, and go all in on that one, would be my advice.
They may well start prioritising one of the training sessions over the other one as well, and that's very hard to take for the coach that's been there all along if it's not their session, isn't it? I've been on the receiving end of that once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, when I ran a team, I said, well, if you want me to commit to you guys, then you commit to me and you don't play for another team. So I was a bit harsh with it, and wouldn't let them join another team. Well, they could, but then if that was the case with the players, then they'd have to get another coach, because I was giving up my time. I had no child in the team, and I thought, commit to me and I'll commit to you. Rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but it worked. And then as soon as I left, they all went and joined Saturday teams, and then they lasted 1 season, 2 seasons after that before the team folded. And I think it was just because they were playing for 2 teams, and different teams, and sometimes they were competing with each other on one day, and then they were all together on the next day, and all the chat would be about the match the day before, and I didn't like it. And of course, a lot of these teams will then have training sessions during the week, and you find suddenly that your child's doing team training 4 or 5 times a week, maybe, and 2 matches at the weekend, and you might have other kids to think about, and there's family time and other activities. So it's my own personal opinion. I think it's too much.
Well, my opinion is the same as yours.
It often is, Jeffrey.
That's
why we're friends.
Let's see what Betsy's opinion is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a tricky one, because I don't know if I 100% agree.
Good.
Firstly, I'm not sure about your maths.
Oh, okay. Go on.
But I think we need to brush past that. I think that's just my logical brain. But anyway, we'll reassess that or leave it up for audience debate. I think I get what you're saying, and you're very much, this is where it's kind of good to have this sort of conversation, because you're coming at it very much from a coach point of view. And I'm thinking, well, there's a lot of context that we don't know. But if this is a child who wants to play, like, is just absolutely I've got a picture of little Johnny in front of me, buzzing to play, wanting to play on a Saturday, wanting to play as much as he can. Yeah, I want to play with this team on a Saturday. I want to play with this team on a Sunday. Yeah, there might be extra training sessions in the week. I'm just so excited. I love my football. I enjoy it. I struggle with whether I'd want to peg that back as a parent or a coach. I think it's totally different if the parent is like, right, okay, I think you need to be playing on a Saturday, Johnny, because these guys are playing 2 games a week and we really don't want you to fall behind. That's totally different. But I'm struggling with the concept of, and I'm almost looking at probably big high profile athletes internationally, where you think, look at Venus and Serena Williams, who would have spent hours and hours and hours on the tennis court. Yeah, every day I want to go and play tennis. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I get what you're saying from like a coach point of view, that if it's a team session, there's less touches on the ball, maybe less dedicated training. Would time be better spent working on individual skills, or having a kickabout with mates or whatever? And I totally understand that. But if it's purely from a kind of this child's got so much passion and wants to be playing as much as possible, I just think I'd struggle to say, I think that's not a good idea. So I don't know if that's controversial.
I don't think it's controversial at all. I think a lot of parents find themselves in that situation, because there are parents who don't want their children to play twice in a weekend for those reasons I said. They've got brothers and sisters, and they like to go away for the weekend, and money and things like that, but they're faced with a child that really, really wants to do it because they absolutely love playing football. So I do get it from that point of view. Again, I always seem to go to the negative side of things, because I have to pick up pieces of negativity quite a lot. So that's my kind of default option, is to look at the negative stuff that I've had to deal with in the past. But yeah,
I think as well, what links is we've spoken several times about like identity, and I totally understand what you're saying there in terms of there being siblings potentially. Like it then consumes all of the weekend, and travel time is important. I do think that is an important factor to consider, how much time your child's just spending traveling to and from games, and that can end up sucking out enjoyment for them as well as for you as the parent, having to ferry them around all over the place. But I think if the child maybe is playing too much football, then there is that danger of that identity being solely consumed by, I just play football, I don't want to do anything else. But it's such a difficult position to be in, because also for a child that actually might go on and play professional football, for argument's sake, that child, can you even curb that enthusiasm of them wanting to play football all the time? And is that good for some children and not for others? So I think it's such a difficult position to be in for a parent. I don't have an answer for that, I suppose.
I think you have to come from a genuine place, like you said, and work out what's best for everyone. Look a little bit further down the road, and why do they want to? Why do I want them to? Shall we facilitate it? What are the pros and cons, and make a decision based on that. I expect there's players who played Saturdays and Sundays who get a lot out of it, and likewise some that it is a little bit too much for. But I'll go back to it as long as the training's good and they're getting a lot of contact time with the ball. That's the important thing, rather than just the matches, because they're not getting enough contact time. It's not like a quick fix. Oh well, we'll put them in for double matches and the kid's going to be double good. Like, playing all weekend. It doesn't work like that, and there's a lot more to consider with it.
Yeah, and I think you're coming with it with a context of Betsy might not have seen the local grassroots football is quite kind of adultificated. What's the word I'm trying to say?
If it's not a word, I like it. It should be.
I like it.
So it's quite adult. It's not kids just playing. It's very much, it looks like senior football on a Saturday or Sunday, and that's when they're quite often development leagues, or dressed up as development leagues, but it's really all about results, even at this young age, isn't it? And
yeah,
if the team's not winning, that's when we go back to them holding trials and releasing players and doing all the things we talked about that we don't like.
Yeah.
So down the road, long-term development-wise, it might not actually be a very good thing. And players that don't tend to do this, we see long-term benefits rather than the short-term gains that cloud people's judgments for kind of 12 to 18 months. And then it tends to all start breaking down, a bit like the scenario you talked about with your team, not allowing them to play on a Saturday, and then when they did, it takes shelf life of about 12 to 18 months, and then it all seems to come crumbling down, doesn't it? So long-term development wise, I would have a few concerns as well, because of all the things you've talked about, Bez.
Well, I think when I get a lot of children who drop out at 12, 13, 14 years of age, if you analysed all the things they did, connecting the dots going backwards, you'll probably find that they played Saturdays, Sundays, or the majority played Saturdays, Sundays, trained 2, 3, 4 times a week, had one-to-one coaches and all the things that we don't like. And when every time you do one of those little things, you're adding to the risk of burnout and the enjoyment in the long run disappearing, and then dropping out of the game. So you have to be careful with all of these decisions. It's a difficult one, because I don't want to advise that, yeah, if your kid's absolutely buzzing to play with their friends on a Saturday, or a different set of friends, that they shouldn't, but just be very careful of it. And why does the manager want your child to play for them? Is it because it's going to help them win games of football? Or are they generally interested in helping children develop and be the best players they can? There's lots of factors involved.
I mean, the only reason you pointed all that stuff out is because you genuinely care, isn't it, Pez? And the easy short answer would be, yeah, go and give it a try and find out if they like it or not, and go from there. And
yeah, I think my point with it as well is going back to something Betsy said. She said about like the Williams sisters and stuff at tennis, and so I'm going to contradict myself slightly here. And the ice hockey players, and there are certain sports where they've specialised and they do lots and lots of training. Swimming, it's not really frowned upon for a upcoming future swimming star to be up at 5 a.m, do a couple of hours before school, do a couple of hours after school every day, and that's not really frowned upon. But then people like me, when it comes to football, say, oh, they might be doing too much. So yeah, it is a really tricky one, and I think the parents in the best position to maybe work out what's best for their child and the family.
I suppose the difference is that they were doing individual training in all those hours, not swim meets or massive tennis tournaments twice a weekend. They were getting their development in, opposed to win at all costs, which it always tends to be.
Yeah, I think if you were saying to me, I want my child to train every night of the week, but just play once at the weekend, that might be different. I think it's just because it's 2 matches, and it's like as if that's going to be the answer to fulfilling their potential, is just playing more and more games, and it's the training that's the most important, and the quality of training. I think the answer is, well, 2 things I've got out of this question is, one, I need to either stop doing maths or get better at it, and 2, maybe children should play more futsal on one of those days a week, Geoff. I'm not just saying it because you're sat there, but I don't think there's anything better at accelerating your child's learning and development than playing futsal. It just takes care of itself. So maybe play futsal on one day, football on the other, and it might be all the boxes ticked for everybody.
The only thing I just add is that sometimes, and I totally get what you guys are saying in terms of a training, and you make a good point, Geoff, about the swimming example and even a tennis example. The time they are participating is probably very directly related to what their own training needs are, whereas in a match situation or in team training, it might not always look that way in terms of what an individual's gaining. But I was also thinking that if your child is playing or wants to play, or you allow them to play on a Saturday and a Sunday, and then also at some point they want to watch a game on the telly or they want to go to football, like sometimes that can be a good thing in terms of actually them being super passionate and super engaged in one thing. And it might be that they're just really, really into football and they don't participate in other sports. And actually, I don't know if there's particularly a right or wrong with, you wouldn't necessarily stop your child, going down to St Mary's and watching their 3 o'clock kickoff and playing football on a Sunday because it's too much football. It's like, where's the balance between actually that passion is something to be encouraged and just managed appropriately for the individual, I guess. I was just thinking that it's not just playing, is it? It's everything else that might go along with that. Just really wanting to be involved and immersed in football.
I think that when we say, yeah, go for it because they're really passionate about it, it seems quite innocent. But something we haven't mentioned is the conflicting messages they might be getting from the 2 teams and the 2 managers and the 2 clubs. So I've seen it before where a child is a very skillful player, likes to take players on. So on one day, they allowed to receive the ball, maybe on the wing, and they take players on and create chances. And then they play on another day where the manager doesn't like that sort of football. They want to play 1 and 2 touch. And the child's getting conflicting messages about what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, which can really confuse them and affect their development. I mean, I've heard of one child went to a Saturday club and they tried some skill and was actually shouted at during the match, "We don't do that fancy stuff here." Whereas for their other team, they were encouraged to try things, make mistakes, learn from it. Some completely conflicting advice and ethos from both sides. So I've always been very wary of it. That is it worth it? Possibly having conflicting advice and confusing your child. Again, depending on what age it is. They're 13, 14, 15, then they can handle this type of thing, and conflict and a bit of pressure and different situation scenarios might be healthy for them, a bit of stress. But if they're 6, 7, 8, 9, then I think having conflicting messages from different adults that are supposed to be helping them, not hindering them, can be difficult. Goodness, we went full in on that one, didn't we?
It was deep.
Dived in 2-footed there, didn't we? Right, we better crack on because
Question number 6.
yes.
Hi guys, I see that you're holding an elite training camp this summer. Are you looking forward to it? And what type of things will the players be doing?
Yes, so we're holding an elite training camp this summer. I'm running it, and you two are my special guests. Which, yes, I am really, really looking forward to it. And we have got Andre, a local fitness coach who does a lot of football fitness, coming in to help the children learn how to become match fit and do a bit of pre-season style fitness with them. Hopefully we're getting a goalkeeping coach, looking at one of our ex-Pezzers players that's now a full-time professional to come back and have a chat with the kids. So there'll be lots going on. And Geoff, you're our high performance skills development coach for the week, aren't you? So what is that going to entail?
So at Pezzers, you've got the skill tech scheme, and Pezzers sessions of the school years 1 to 6, and then hopefully they graduate into Wessex Futsal Club, which is for school years 7 to 11 and adults. And we've got the Apex Skill Tech scheme, which is very similar topics, just more advanced, more combos, more skills put together in
More challenges.
More challenging probably is the best way to describe it. So we've got that to work through, as well as a lot of futsal based coaching sessions.
Cool.
And I can't wait.
And Betsy's coming in to give a talk on one of the days.
I am. I'm looking forward to it. It's been quite a few. Actually, you missed some years through COVID, did you? But I feel like I've been making little cameo appearances for a few years now.
So we've done two before, and I think you were on them both, weren't you? And then we were due to do a third, and COVID ruined it, and it ruined the one year after. So yeah, it's been a little while. This is the first one since COVID ruined it all.
Yeah.
Back.
So I think the last few had various topics, I think, but just sort of, I guess, the headlines of sports psychology. So managing pressure, dealing with disappointments or dealing with mistakes, growth mindset, lots of different points. So hopefully I'll be covering a few different things that will be helpful. Yeah,
so we're trying to sort of always base it around the FA 4-corner model, aren't we? So that all those bases are ticked. I'm going to throw it on you. Can you remind us what the 4 corners are, Jeffrey?
Physical, so you've got that covered.
Yeah.
Technical, tactical,
which is you.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Psychological,
which is Betsy.
What are the 3?
Social.
Social.
So social will be my responsibility to make sure that the environment's right throughout the whole.
Everyone's responsibility.
Well, everyone's responsibility, yeah. But I feel like I need to be an expert in some field in it and just not leave it to you. I'm now the social expert.
You're very good at the
social side of things. So yeah, really looking forward to it. It's coming up in August for school years 7 to school years 10, so under 11s to under 15s. And hopefully it'll be even better than the previous 2 that we did before.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Cool. Well, that was a simple question, wasn't it? Which people could keep asking us ones that we actually know the answers to. That'll be handy. Right. Is it me?
Yeah.
Right, cool. I run an under 11 team, and I've had a couple of players miss games due to being punished for their behaviour away from football. Although I appreciate the children need discipline, and it can be very frustrating as we only have a small squad, and I've had to change training sessions at the last minute. What are your thoughts on taking away football as a punishment? I think we should go straight into you on this one, Betsy. If you don't.
Straight in. Yeah, I read this one, and that it's difficult because I'm trying to deal with a dog that's going to bark at any moment. So I'll try my best to keep this answer concise. I think it's really difficult because you don't want to take away something that's of benefit from probably all your four corners that you just mentioned. And I would say, is there anything you can do before you take away something like sport or exercise, such as computer games, phones, like depending on age, things like that? I'd be reluctant to take sport, exercise, extracurricular kind of activity away first, even if it seems like the easy go-to. That's the thing that your child's going to be most hurt with you taking away. Yeah, it's a challenging one, but if football is a huge motivating factor and there is some other behavioural challenges, then it might be an effective way over a really short period of time to manage that behaviour. So yeah, I've gone really vague with that answer, but I think in summary, I would take something else away first if possible that is less of, or has the potential to be less of, a positive impact. So take away computers, TV time, your favorite food, like a treat food or something, I don't know, but I'd be reluctant to take a healthy behavior away, essentially.
Yeah, I agree with this massively, and it's happened to me on a few occasions when I've run teams where I've missed them from training sessions and I've missed them from match time, and it is frustrating as a manager. And I agree with you. I think in the short term, if you need a massive impact, then maybe once, then you've always got maybe that threat again in future for it. But I think if you start doing it a lot, it's a very negative thing to get into. I've written here, never take training away, because as I'm always trying to say, it is the training that's the most important thing. So if you're taking training away but still letting them play in matches, you're subconsciously letting your child think that training is not as important as matches, when really you want to be showing children or emphasizing to children that it's training that is the most important thing. And I would say, if ever you do take a match away as a punishment, make sure that the child still attends that match so they can see what they're missing out on. And this happened to me once. A parent, as a punishment, said, my child's, your dog's there. Hi, Betsy's dog. The child didn't attend because they'd been naughty. And then later that evening, I'd seen that they posted on Facebook that they had a great day together playing computer games and watching films and stuff. And I thought, well, that's not much of a punishment, is it? It would have been much more of a punishment if they'd been made to come and watch the game and see what they were missing out on, and then they still had the commitment to support their teammates as well. What do you think, Geoffrey?
Well, I haven't made notes, but I'd mentally remembered you saying that at a training session, that better punishment would be to bring the child along, make them watch, see what they're missing out on, and then take them home when the session was finished, so that it is actually a punishment, not a reward. That sounds like playing consoles with your parents and having a great time. So
I think that's a really good point, that you almost use the punishment, the participation is what you are taking away, but maybe give it a different learning objective, like you say. I'd like that idea.
Yeah, I think it's important. So make them come along, support the team, because you are committed to that team. Otherwise, if you're just willy-nilly not turning up, you're actually doing nothing but letting your teammates down, really, and your manager. So my advice would be never take training away. As a one-off, maybe a match, if you really want to make an impact. But I agree with you. I would be very reluctant to take anything that has so much positivity involved with it, to take that away.
So how are we going to? This is a coach of an under-11s team, isn't it? And it's the players that are getting taken away. So
yes,
how can they get this message across to the parents that they're actually letting everyone else down? And
you could
Send them the podcast.
the link to the podcast. We might double our listeners. But if they need to, I suppose they need to ask for a word with them and just say, I've noticed you're taking football away as a punishment. I'm just wondering whether we could have a chat about that, and explain that it's frustrating and that you've had to. If you've only got 8 in your squad or 9 and you've done a training session around 3v3s or something, or a 4v4, and suddenly you have to change it last minute, it can be a bit frustrating, I guess.
And then going back. Sorry, go on, Betsy.
I was going to say, just to play devil's advocate though, if I was working with this coach, I'd actually be thinking, okay, well, that might happen and that's not within your control. You can potentially try and influence it, but actually, how would you deal with that if you had multiple players missing at any one time through injury or illness? Actually from purely the coach perspective, if they don't want to get involved with maybe passing comment to parents, because it's a grey area, isn't it, as to whether you're going to say, I'd suggest you maybe parent differently, which is perhaps how a parent's going to hear it, then actually it's just from the coach point of view, it being an uncontrollable factor. You could perhaps, depending on age of players and whether this is appropriate, speak to players and say, look, if you're conducting yourself poorly away from football, then perhaps you're going to get this taken away from you at some point, as an attempt to, I guess, use football as a coach to I guess enhance other forms of behavior and other, that's why we love sport, isn't it? Because it's not just about the sport, it's about kind of teamwork. And again, there'll be an age appropriateness of this, but whether it's a case of, if you behave poorly and then your parents pull you from the game, then you've let your teammates down. That might sound really savage. So there's a difference, I guess, between age groups there and whether that's appropriate, but there might be other learnings to go on there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. You do have to be very careful telling parents that perhaps they should be doing something a bit different. It's dodgy ground, isn't it, when it's parenting and your job is just to facilitate their football. So then tell them how to be a parent and discipline's very, very difficult. So that is tricky.
It'd be nice if they could give something back to the coach, wouldn't it? So they've let the coach down. Could they then turn up early and help mark the pitch out and put the nets on and do all the things that coach is probably annoyed that they have to do on their own every Sunday morning in the cold or in the rain, and wash some bibs and wash some kit and hang it out on the line. And actually it would then maybe give those children that are letting them down and the teammates down a little bit perspective about just how much other people do for them and the knock-on effect it does do, and that might be enough to help shape their behaviours.
When the kids could just stop being naughty, it'd be great, wouldn't it? I'm actually just thinking of my own son, because he can be a little terror. And he plays for Geoff's team. I've not pulled him out yet. No, he's not missed football yet. But if you could have a word, that'd be great.
Don't worry about sending him early.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, don't make him wash the kit or anything. So I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a tricky one. As we've said with pretty much all of these questions tonight, haven't we? It's a tricky one. But I think what you said, trying to get some sort of positive out of it, where maybe you can reinforce good behaviour to the whole group, I think it is a good idea. Oof. And whoever sent that in, then Let's know how that goes.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Is it you?
I know.
Is it about
No.
my Josh?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Right, okay. How are we doing for time? We got enough for one more, do you think? Should we go question number 8? That'll be
me.
That'll be you.
I recently read that there's not much point practicing penalties and free kicks as the same pressure can't be replicated in practice. This is such a Betsy question. Do you think that's true? And my brief notes I've already said earlier in a different question about practice breeding competence and competence breeding confidence. So go on, Betsy.
I've written competence breeds confidence as well, Geoff.
So go on, Betsy.
Go on, Betsy.
So I think there is truth in it being difficult to replicate the same amount of pressure. You cannot replicate the same context. So if I'm working with a player that's going to play in an FA Cup final, and I'm saying, oh, you know, in training today, we're basically going to put you in the situation of scoring a last minute penalty that's going to win you the FA Cup, that I can't replicate that context. But what you can do, you can replicate as many conditions as possible, and you can, in terms of the technique and the decision-making process, that's what you can replicate. So if we take a penalty as an example, you can replicate what the player's pre-penalty routine is. I'm going to move away because I don't know if you can hear my puppy squeaking her toy, which is a slight distraction. So you can practice the routine that a player has before they take a penalty. You can practice, obviously, the actual technique of a penalty kick. You can mimic pressure. So when I've done this actually in a elite setting, I can recall an example actually which might be interesting, where I observed before it was before a cup competition, and at the end of the training session, the coach put all the players in the middle of the pitch and said, right, penalty shootout then, this is how it's going to work. He was acting as referee, and they were numbered. You know, you're going to be penalty taker number 1, these are the teams, etc., etc. Lovely jubbly. So they go up, the first guy comes up and takes his penalty. I can't remember whether he scored or missed. Scored, I think, but that's kind of irrelevant. I'm watching this training session go on, and I'm thinking, okay, you've got all of these players stood basically in the centre circle, messing around, doing keepy-uppies, chatting to each other, milling around, and then each one by one in their order, they're going up and taking their penalties. So I ran over to the coach and I said, this is not replicating what would happen. So what you can do to replicate is stop the session. So he stopped the session, and I basically said, look, none of you guys are doing what you would do in a penalty shootout. You would not be stood there doing any of this stuff. You would be, what are you actually going to do as a team? Are you going to line up? Are you going to link arms? What are you going to do? Because you need to do that now. That's the point of trying to replicate as much as you possibly can, so that situation doesn't feel so alien when it happens. And I've done that twice in 2 different Premier League academies, where one of them actually, we were in a classroom, and I said, all of you stand up, go to the back of the room and show me how you're going to line up for a penalty shootout. And they all were really embarrassed and weren't really sure what to do. And I just made a point of saying, this is a really important aspect of your match prep. Like, there may be a penalty shootout. What are you going to do? Are you standing as a group? Are you linking arms? Are you standing with your hands behind your back? Like, what are you actually going to do? Because then you can also visualize how that's going to play out pre-match. So that's an example of, that is purposeful practice for that kind of context. Yes, you can't bring in 20,000 people into the training ground and practice penalties or make a player feel like it's going to be a match-winning situation, but there is things you can do. And as a coach, there's things you can do to create or mimic a little bit of pressure in a player. So I'm probably going to bore everyone if I go into the ins and outs of that. But for example, you know, it being a competitive, I think in this particular session, the losing team had had to get everyone's lunch, like had to, you know, queue up and plate everyone up their lunch at request and basically wait on them for the rest of the day. So there was something on it, and that can be a humorous element or not, but the fact bringing an element of competition creates an aspect of pressure.
Yeah, I have been in that situation myself. When I was at Charlton Athletic, I actually had to play against another member of staff because Alan Pardew said that only one of us would be allowed to go to Marbella with the team. With Nicky Weaver in goal, Man City legend, and I lost. So yeah, but bless him, he let us both go anyway. But it was great. They had all the coaching staff and all the first team players around watching, and yeah, it is very difficult to replicate pressure. It does funny things to you. I changed my mind when I decided I was going to go one way and then the other, and yeah, it can do things to you, and it is difficult to replicate the pressure. I mean, I've seen ideas when I was involved in pro football of academy teams having penalty shootouts at the end of their matches to try and put some pressure on it. I've heard ideas of trying to get sort of under 23 teams to the grounds at half-time of first team matches when there's a lot of people in there, and having penalty shootout there so they can get used to the walk in front of the crowd. And I saw there's a pre-season friendly just last week. I think it was between two Premier League teams playing abroad. I can't remember who it was. And I think they had a penalty shootout at the end. Was it Arsenal? Did Arsenal lose to Man United or something like that? I think they might have done in a friendly, and then they had a penalty shootout at the end. So they are trying to think of ways of replicating this pressure. But the players have to be on board with that as well, because sometimes they think, oh, it's only a penalty, I can score from 12 yards, and they can be, dare I say it, a little bit arrogant about it at the pro level. And then when it does come to the crunch, it can do funny things to you. But they said free kicks here as well, didn't they? Did they say free kicks and penalties? Yeah, I mean, Beckham practiced them all the time, didn't he? Free kicks. James Ward-Prowse practiced them all the time. If I'm going to have a player take a penalty for my team or a free kick, I'm going to have more confidence in one that's practiced them 1,000 times than someone who hasn't bothered and thinks they're naturally talented. So I don't think it can do any harm to become technically proficient through repetition and practice. And I wrote here, if you do that, you're earning the right through practice to give yourself the best possible chance for success when it really matters, which is all you can do, really.
I think as well with free kicks, free kicks are slightly different to penalties, because penalties are very fixed. They are from the same distance. And yes, you've got a different keeper potentially, but the rest of it is is a closed skill. So there's not a lot else that changes in terms of the actual skill execution, the execution of the penalty. A free kick, however, is not often going to be in exactly the same place. So physical practice takes on a bit of a different meaning there, because you've got it's more open. Okay, it's not in open play, but there's going to be lots of different angles, distances, and conditions. And also, as much as there is a specified distance, you know, referees are going to vary as well with how that's marked out. There's a little bit more going on with the free kick. So practicing free kicks, there's definitely value in practicing everything, but yeah, free kicks being slightly different.
Yeah, not to the detriment of practice in other areas of the game. If you're talking about a 9 or 10-year-old that's very one-footed, I wouldn't waste time banging in penalties and free kicks when you could be spending that time working on your weaker foot, and getting something that's going to be more impactful for your all-round game. But if you're a little bit older, 14, 15, 16 and beyond, and you know you're at a technical level already, and free kicks is going to be your thing, then yeah, maybe spend the time after training or in the garden, wherever it might be, down the park, just like Beckham did all those years ago. Scored one of the most famous free kicks of all time for England against Greece to qualify us for I think it was the 2002 World Cup at Old Trafford. Last minute, banged it in. I don't think he'd have done that if he hadn't spent all those years practicing. So, as you said, Geoff, competence breeds confidence, and you get competence through purposeful practice. Are we all happy?
Very
good. I think we've done all right. for our first remote one?
It went well. Hopefully you haven't heard too much dog fighting or toy squeaking or any of the above during that.
It's all part of it. I didn't actually
Part
hear
of the charm.
Probably when we listen back to it, we will. Who knows?
Didn't hear a squeak.
On that note, please, witty banter. I think we should leave it there. And as always, never forget, football is not that important, but children are. And we'll all see you next time. Thanks, guys.